Good morning, this is Bob Schmitt. Aside from the internet and smartphones, nothing has affected civilization more than the accurate measurement of time. During the Dark Ages, pillaging had destroyed most libraries and schools in Europe, and the centers of learning moved to the large monasteries and churches. Scientific-minded friars made the first mechanical reminders for prayer time, and later to call people to worship. At first these timers were placed in the vestries to regulate the service, and as reliability improved, they were put up in the tower with hands so that people could see the time from the outside. 13th century church tower clocks that tolled or struck the hours on a large bell helped citizens and workers to rise on time, reminded merchants to open punctually, plus signaled the end of the workday. We now drive our cars X miles an hour to reach our destination at an appointed time, and this video camera records enough frames per second for the movement to appear smooth to your eyes. We look at our cell phone 10 times a day to see if we're on time. Although countless books have been written about clocks, many potential collectors simply don't have the time in their busy lives to study these books. Today I begin my project of recording several short videos that can be quickly digested and then reviewed at any time on the internet. Moreover, almost any topic I touch can be found in more detail on the web, and if my videos encourage you to look further, then I have accomplished my goal. Our English word for hour comes from the Greek hora, from which is derived the formal word horology, or the study of time and the art of measuring time. Thousands of years ago it was noticed that buildings, monuments, and obelisks cast a shadow on the ground, and thus the rise and fall of the sun, along with marked gradations on the ground, formed a crude indication of time. Later sundials were designed for use on the side of buildings or in the center of a sunny garden. The earliest evidence of humans constructing a fixed device for following the sun and stars lies at Stonehenge in Wiltshire, England, and dating back to 3100 BC. Many other smaller techniques developed, such as burning a striped or marked candle, or burning a rope with knots tied at regular intervals. The Chinese burned trails of incense or special wood in small metal containers with grooves that directed the burning, and the total consumption of the medium marked the end of the session. Persians put sand in blown glass tubes with a narrow waist that caused the sand to pass at a slow rate by gravity. The larger of these were called hourglasses, and we can still buy a 3-minute egg timer of blown glass containing white sand. We simply turn it over, placing the sand on top to start the timing. Perhaps as early as 4000 BC, the Chinese discovered that a bowl with a crack or small hole would fill with water at a regular but accelerating rate, still requiring the same amount of time to sink each time. Many forms of these clepsydra were fashioned over the millennia in Egypt and Babylon, including a new wave of interest in 14th century England, where a dial and hand driven by a chain was added, with one end of the chain connected to a float resting in a water-filled chamber that emptied slowly. However, all of the above devices indicate only the passage of time, not the actual time, which would require future development of mechanics. Moving forward to the 10th century, we see the written records of Pope Sylvester II referring to horologia, and monks wrote at this time of mechanical devices that reminded them that prayers should begin. In the 12th and 13th centuries we find large mechanical tower clocks still in place for us to study. Amazingly, modern scholars feel that the very first clocks may have actually been conceived in Alexandria, Egypt, a famed center of learning for the first 6 centuries AD. The infamous inventor Hero studied in his native Alexandria, Roman Egypt, and lived from 10 AD to 70 AD. His published works, titled Hieronis, showed designs for a steam engine, a wind engine, and his Hero engine, plus references to regular intervals which show his consideration of time. However, most of these ideas lay dormant for another 1,000 years. The earliest mechanical clocks used a horizontal folio for time regulation. These clocks were very inaccurate, often off by hours each day. Here I have a wooden example. This is called a Columbus clock, which was made for the Chicago Exposition in 1892. And at top you can see time is regulated by this folio that swings back and forth. And little weights could be added at the extreme edges of the folio to help regulate the time. Now in the 1400s, Leonardo da Vinci made drawings showing a fusee and a pendulum. There's no evidence he ever tried to make a working model. However, independent of this, around 1581, Galileo noticed the regular rate of chandeliers swinging in the cathedral and began a working model that his son later finished around 1602. Finally, a third independent researcher, Christian Huygens, a Dutch physicist, was granted a patent in 1657 for the first pendulum regulation of a clock. With a pendulum and a movable bob at the bottom, clocks could for the first time be easily regulated for accurate timekeeping. I have a couple of examples. Here's a large pendulum from a taller grandfather type clock. And here's a small Ansonia brass pendulum, typical of what you find on almost any shelf clock or china clock that's used. And these can come in any size or variation as long as they can hang and swing. By the late 1600s, quality pendulum clocks were being made in London, France, and Germany, and we really see the beginning of the golden era of clockmaking. My future segments will discuss how accurate timekeeping improved navigation at sea and made safe flying in the air possible, how American clockmaker Eli Terry applied his skills to interchangeable parts and the assembly line was born. Note this invention is often incorrectly attributed to Eli Whitney and his cotton gin. This new assembly process led to a worldwide explosion in clock production from the mid-1800s onward. There were timepieces, striking clocks, chime clocks, musical clocks, and repeaters, such as might fit the genius of the inventor and the pocketbook of the buyer. Can you even believe that battery-powered clocks have been made for over 200 years? 20th century applications such as the tuning fork, the quartz crystal, and ultimately the atomic clock open up a myriad of topics in this necessity that now occupies only the right-hand corner of your monitor or the top of your cell screen. If you have special questions or suggestions, please see my contact page at westernhorology.com. Thank you again, and see you soon.